You, of course, were in the locker today and chatting up with some of the defensive players and other players in the locker room. But what seems to be the mood specifically for some of those defenders? I know you were talking with Jaron Kearse, who's one of the leaders of that back end. But, I mean, defensively, it might be the worst game that they've played all year.
Yeah, it's very clear that Jaron Kearse is, well, not only a great quote, but he's one of the leaders of that defense for sure. And I would say he came off as pretty disgusted today while he was sitting at his locker talking about not just this past game, but really their last couple of games. And, he sat there for probably about 10, 12 minutes, where most guys talk for about 5 or 6 minutes. Like, he was just fine with answering every question that needed to be asked and gave up, very thoughtful, long answers. He was not trying to get out of there. Sometimes you talk to guys and it's a tough subject. They don't really, they'll answer the questions, but they're trying to get out of there. They don't really want to go very long. But Jaron, you could just tell that he was disgusted with the way the team played. And there's a lot of talk about, whenever anything like this happens, you have to have a players-only meeting and team meetings and all that stuff like that. And he was just so clear about, we don't need to talk anymore. We talked in the preseason. We talked during training camp. We've talked a bunch throughout this season. It's about what we're putting out on film. And he was just very open about how what they've been putting on film defensively is just not up to their standard, and straight up said that any team that's watching their defense right now, it would be licking their chops to go against this defense. So, he was very, very open about it. I thought he was the most interesting interview in the locker room today by far.
Brian asked me this earlier, and I know Dan Quinn said there's going to be a competition for cornerback 2 opposite Trayvon Diggs. Are you buying that, or do you think that's going to be Nahshon Wright?
No, I think there'll be an open competition. I don't know if I'll put it this way. I'd be surprised if it was for this game coming up, if it was Mackenzie Alexander, Kendall Sheffield, or Trayvon Mullen. I just don't know that any one of those three are quite to knowing the defense the way that Dan Quinn wants to know it yet. Now, it could come to that point within the next week or two. I'd say, though, this one comes down to Nahshon Wright and Kelvin Joseph. I would say Nahshon Wright is the leader in the clubhouse, but I think it comes down to those two right there, because those are the two that have been around the longest. Those are the two that, let's be honest, they're younger guys in the system. They would like, if they had their pick, they would want one of those guys to win the job because they would like them to be here for the long term. So I think it'll be close between those two, and I wouldn't be surprised if Nahshon Wright and Kelvin Joseph kind of split reps at that position, and they go with whoever's playing better in the game.
John, I threw out there the idea, and you mentioned about Alexander, and my guys around the league are telling me that, hey man, he's a slot player. This guy's a kind of a good little slot player, veteran guy. Could you see of maybe Alexander in the slot and Bland playing on the outside? That maybe that the guys that all those guys that are trying right now, that maybe that Dan Quinn would say, well, we can put the veteran guy inside and let me know the one guy that I have that I know can actually play.
That's a good point. And a week ago, if you asked me that question, I'd say I doubt it. I don't see that happening. But now, after seeing what happened in Jacksonville, being at Dan Quinn's press conference yesterday, man, I think they're open to any option. So I think that would certainly be on the table. If they think that Jerron Bland is their second best outside corner, and they think, Mackenzie Alexander can play and hold up well in the slot, then that absolutely. I really do get the feeling that it wasn't just lip service that Dan Quinn was paying yesterday. I really do believe everything's on the table for them because of the way they played against the Jags. I think that surprised them that they played that poorly on the back end. So there isn't a scenario that you could tell me right now that I would completely say is off the table.
John, I asked Zach this question too, and because yesterday I was listening to the press conference, and Kellen Moore was talking about. He goes, "Hey, I've got to get." I've got to get Gallup more involved. I got to find ways to get him more involved. I think this is the second time this season we've had I need to get Gallup more involved talk. Is this on Gallup or is this on Kellen Moore?
Yeah, I think it's probably more on Kellen Moore just because he's the one designing the plays, but I don't think there's any question that we haven't seen the same Michael Gallup this season that we've seen in previous seasons, and a lot of people will talk about, when you have a knee injury like that, it's tough to just go back, next season you'll be fine, you just put it behind you, and you'll be back to the player you were. I mean, and that could be some of the stuff that Odell Beckham's going with too. It's not just the physical; it's also the mental side of getting past that injury and having trust in the knee, and then also taking hits that, let's be honest, probably scare you a little bit, whether it be in practice, whether it be in a game. Those aren't the type of things that they're going to be going out tweeting about after the game or telling reporters like, man, I took that hit in the second quarter and that really scared me. I thought about sitting out the rest of the game. They're not going to tell anybody that. They might tell maybe a close friend or a family member that, but you just never know what's going on behind the scenes when you come off of an injury like that. I just don't think that he's been the same player. And so, hey, maybe that's factored in the way Kellen Moore has called the offense, knowing that, hey, there's a couple of these plays that, yeah, a year ago, we'd run this to Michael Gallup all day long. This year, I don't know if he's 100% confident on this particular route, so we'll have him do this on this particular play as opposed to something maybe we would have had him doing last year. There's no question that they haven't gotten what they were hoping for from Michael Gallup this year, and not getting anything from Jalen Tolbert, a third-round pick. Those are the two biggest reasons why they've gone out and signed T.Y. Hilton and why Jerry continues to talk about Odell Beckham, because they were hoping that things were going to be better at the position, and now all of a sudden we're here in December, and they're not.
Talking with Jon Machota here of The Athletic on 105 through the Fan with the GBag Nation. I wonder overall your opinion of Kellen Moore. I think there's times where he's done an excellent job. I mean, the Colts game comes to mind, getting CeeDee Lamb involved, and there's times throughout a game, I thought, against Jacksonville where he was calling a really good game, and then there's times where things start to really get stagnant within this offense. So where do you think he's at and this offense is at right now?
I think more of Kellen Moore than everybody on Twitter, I feel like, especially coming out of this game. He's been getting a lot of heat. He's tough to read. I will say Jason Garrett is certainly a guy at the podium or even off the record that, it's tough for him to really give you a ton. Kellen Moore takes that to another level. He's a very difficult read, which is why I think it's so fascinating that Dolphins job came down to him and Mike McDaniel, because I don't think you could have two more opposite people. And, I think Kellen Moore, he's had ups and downs. I think he's gotten better as he's been their offensive coordinator over the years. There was times, even going back to a year ago, where early in the season it seemed like he was really on top of things and cutting edge, and there was a lot of variety. And as the season went on, it tightened up, and you've seen less of that. And I don't know. I think he's done a pretty good job. I'm not on that side of people that are ready to move on from him. I think he's been pretty good as an offensive coordinator. Could he be better? Yeah, absolutely. But there's still things he does that I like a lot. But then there's things he does that I'm not a huge fan of. Like I can give you in just a 3-play sequence when the Cowboys got the ball back after Jaron Kearse forced that fumble. I love the run play he ran where Tony Pollard lined up out wide as the wide receiver came in motion. And on, the 3rd and 10 play, I hated that they ran all those verticals and really didn't give Dak a huge chance on a play where maybe they just pick up, something underneath, or maybe, Dak just runs and then gets down and they're forced to call a timeout. So there's things that I think about Kellen Moore where I'm like, hey, I see why teams are interested in him as a coach. And then there's other times where I'm just like, yeah, maybe he needs to do this a little bit longer.
Where are we, John, on when we talk about Dak Prescott? I mean, I don't know. There's so many people that they feel like that he's this and others that feel like he's that. Where are you on him as far as the interceptions, the turnovers? Does he need to learn in year 7 that he can't gamble on every single play, or is that going to not ever change about him?
I think where we're at in his career, I don't think you can change that, because I don't think a coach would want to change that. And if they did, it would have to be something it'd have to be some deep process in the offseason. You wouldn't be doing it now during the season. I mean, one of the most interesting on the podium answers Mike McCarthy has given us this year was really yesterday when he talked about how, they're not going to be dialing this thing back with Dak. I mean, they're still full steam ahead, and they want him to be aggressive. And I believe that's because Mike thinks that's what would ultimately take you to win a Super Bowl with this team. They can't have Dak, being passive and just, overthinking things out on the field. They need him to be out there and rip it. And the interceptions, no question, they're an issue. The first one is clearly on him. The second one is clearly not on him in that game. But to have as many as he's had since he's returned and be a player that hasn't had those, that's no question that's an issue for this team. The only thing I will say about that is, and Brian, you know this, I'm a huge Matthew Stafford fan.
Yeah.
He led the NFL in interceptions last year, and he had 3 in the playoffs on top of that, the 17 he threw during the regular season, and he still was able to get them a Lombardi trophy. So there's a part of me that sits there and goes, man, Dak's got to rein this thing in. And then there's another part of me where I sit there and I go, yeah, but you also don't want him second-guessing things, and maybe him ripping it is your best chance at getting the Lombardi Trophy. I personally don't care about if the Cowboys can win one playoff game. This team is good enough on paper. They have the talent in this building that they can make a run and go all the way. So whatever gives you the best chance to go all the way, do that. And I think doing that is Dak playing aggressive.
Can I ask you, though, with Stafford and the Rams, when he was turning the ball over, that defense bailed him out, right? Was that, I mean, do you have the defense to be able – now, you threw an interception the other day in the Houston game that should have killed you. You know, they got down inside they were knocking on the door to win the football game, and your defense came up. But the current state of this defense, can it play through the turnovers that he might have?
Probably a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, I was very confident they did. With these injuries to the secondary, Leighton Vander Esch being out, it's more of a question mark for me. But I think that ultimately, if they're going to be a team that does get to the Super Bowl, it will be because the defense steps up. So you're going to have some trust in them. You're going to have trust that they're going to be able to get back to what they were a couple weeks ago when they were a defense that was averaging 4 sacks per game, not a defense that has 1 sack in the last 2 games. So if you don't have that pass rush, then I really don't think if Dak is passive or aggressive, it's going to matter. You're not going to get to Arizona. So the defense is going to have to find a way, whether it's Dan Quinn scheming some things up or doing some things a different way. The defense is going to have to play better, and I think that's its own thing. Dak playing the way he did got him 34 points on Sunday, and like Jaron Kearse said in the locker room, there's not a team out there that if this offense scores 34 points, the defense shouldn't be able to win that game for them.
No, I'm glad you brought up the pass rush because I think Brian and I talked about this in the post game on Sunday. This defense looks very ordinary if they're not getting after the quarterback, and the pass rush is what seemed to make them special. How worried are you right now with the lack of pass rush from this defense in the last few games?
It's concerning to me because it makes me wonder, the health of Micah Parsons, because he's certainly getting beat up over there with all the chips and double teams, triple teams he's seeing. And while, Aaron Donald would see things like that for the Rams, they also had a Von Miller last year that would, take advantage of those things. And so that's the thing, like Dorrance Armstrong, DeMarcus Lawrence, Osa, Dante Fowler, some of these guys are going to have to make the difference some of these games, and there were plays to be made, only having that 1 sack the other night. I mean, yeah, that obviously is not where it needs to be, but there were plays out there for this team to have 2, 3, 4 sacks like they had been averaging. So I still have confidence that they'll be able to get that back. They just have done it for too long this season to think that was an outlier. I think more so these last 2 games have been more of an outlier. So I do think that they will be able to get back to that.
John, I'm of the opinion that this offensive line with Tyron Smith at right tackle is actually better than the one with Terrence Steele. And again, no slam at Terrence Steele. I think he's played pretty well, but I think this offensive line, if you're talking about going forward, finish out the season into the playoffs, this couldn't have been a better situation for the Cowboys with Tyron Smith playing at right tackle.
I completely agree, but I will say, I thought he looked good on Sunday, and I think they'll be just fine at right tackle with him as long as he's out there. It's just that's the thing with Tyron at this part in his career.
Sure.
Every play, you're just kind of looking at, you know how it is, Brian, when you're up in the press box,
always watching with 77.
Down on the field, you have binoculars out, and you're just like, who is it? What number, who's down, trying to get help from other people around you, and you're just sitting there, and it's just been too many years where you're constantly like, yep, 77's down, 77's going to the tent, 77's going to silent. So, but yeah, I agree with you. If he's healthy, like I thought he could probably stayed out there the whole game. You probably didn't even need to do the rotation with him with Peters. But yeah, if you tell me he's going to be healthy and he's going to be your right tackle for the rest of the regular season and all throughout the playoffs, I think they're in that 5 that started that game. That is more than good enough to get you to Arizona if they can all stay healthy together.